Welcome to the Chase Hudson Show, a podcast dedicated to inspiring you to become extraordinary. Each week, we sit down with top-tier business owners, real estate investors, and influencers to inspire you to build your legacy. It's time to level up. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Chase Hudson Show. Today we have Clay Olsen, who is the founder of Fight the New Drug, a campaign to raise awareness of the harmful effects of pornography. Clay went on to found Impact Suite, which is a suite of specialized digital wellness tools, basically a tech company that helps integrate with companies and individuals to really better themselves across the spectrum. Really awesome conversation with Clay. We dig into the pornography, why people are addicted to pornography, its harmful effects neurologically, socially, for relationships, how to quit pornography if that is a struggle that you have. It's a really great conversation. Clay's an awesome dude, so I'm excited for you guys to hear this one. And with that, let's dive in. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Chase Hudson Show. Today we have Clay Olsen. Clay is a passionate social entrepreneur that has dedicated his life to changing lives and spreading good messages. In 2009, he co-founded Fight the New Drug, a campaign to raise awareness of the harmful effects of pornography. In 2013, he founded and led the development of an online addiction recovery program called Fortify to help individuals overcome their struggle with compulsive sexual behaviors. And most recently, Clay founded Impact Suite, an ecosystem of specialized digital wellness tools. Clay's successes have been featured on ABC Nightline, Dr. Drew, CNN, amongst others. And so we're really excited to have Clay on the show today. Welcome in.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we could do this. Well, Clay, first thing I typically ask my guests is to just talk a little bit about your upbringing, maybe childhood or teenage years, anything that was impactful for you that helped develop you into who you are today and the path that you ended up taking.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose I had what I would assume, I guess everybody assumes that their childhood was fairly stereotypical, but I had the stereotypical upbringing in that, we went out and played all the time. And my mom had to bring us in with a literal bell for dinner. We played night games almost every night in the summer. We had a lot of fun. I mean, early on, I had a great family. I mean, I come from a family there's 7 siblings total, so 6 other siblings, including myself. And I was inspired by them. I'm number 5 of 7. So a great family, great upbringing, great parents that really helped kind of let us kind of pursue what we wanted to pursue and encouraged us to follow our passions, and they were also very involved in service in the community and helping out and trying to solve some social challenges that we faced. And so that kind of was instilled in me very young to want to, help people, help others, because I saw that reflected and emulated by my parents. And from a very young age, I was entrepreneurial, although I didn't know what that term meant. I just loved creating and building and organizing. And I mean, from a very young age, I was doing I was organizing 3-on-3 tournaments with neighborhood kids, and with charts and where you were playing at his house and their house, and then it organized and everyone had to put in money, so there's a pool at the end. And I got into film, and so everything I did, I guess it was kind of always how can I maximize this? And it was a lot of fun. I had a good upbringing, a good childhood. I want to, in a lot of ways, I want to give that same type of childhood to my kids. I want them to be able to roam freely and to kind of creatively explore both physical environments, but also within their minds and what they want to pursue. And so yeah, I can't complain. In fact, I was blessed to have just a wonderful family.
Love it. Yeah, that's great. Sounds like had great example of service and trying to help others through your parents and that entrepreneurial drive from a young age. And it sounds like those two forces kind of combined here with with your path. So I want to touch on your college experience. I read, I think you went to Utah State. Is that right, Clay?
I did. I attended Utah State. Yes.
Okay. So going into college, being an entrepreneur, how did you approach going into college? I think you had a brief tenure doing sales. But yeah, what was your thought process in terms of how you studied? Did you want to just start a business? Did you think you were going to be a corporate person? How did you kind of approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit, and this isn't for everybody. This isn't the path that everyone should take. But like, school was definitely secondary for me. Like, I started a film company originally, and then later a creative agency, a full marketing agency, while in college. And those were what I was pursuing. You asked, like, did I expect to kind of go and get a corporate job? No, never. That never crossed my mind. Never was a desire of mine. I wanted to build and create. I wanted to inspire others through storytelling, through messages, through creative means. And so school was kind of a ticket punch for me. It was kind of like, check the box, like get it done kind of thing. And so I went to Utah State because it's a great school. It was, my father attended Utah State, so it was kind of like, sure, why not? But my real passion was kind of over here on the side of what the companies I was building at the time, even while in school.
Yeah, makes sense. And yeah, diving in a little bit to that. So I saw Timeline Films, Advent Creative Marketing. So it sounds like those were two ventures you started. I'm curious to hear, your interest in film. Why did you want to go down that route, and how did you get that off the ground?
Yeah, film. Oh man, when I was in high school, I was involved in sports. I was involved in a lot of things, but the two main things I was known for, that I was like passionate, I didn't do anything kind of halfway, was film in high school and student government and student leadership. And those were my two big things, and took a lot of my time. In fact, like, I had keys to the school, so I'd go in and work like all through the night. A lot of times teachers would show up in the next morning, and I was like still at the editing bay working on projects. And I had like a little like mat and a bed set out at school, and they just knew that like I was like, that's what I did. And I did a lot of films for other schools, and I like competed on national film competitions. Like, film was an outlet for me where I could express myself creatively. I could tell stories. I could motivate. I remember the first time I like created it, like I think it was a wedding video. It was like one of the first videos I did. Someone asked me to do, and I was like, sure, like, let me dive in. And I remember them watching the wedding video and like getting very emotional, and clearly they were emotional because of the importance of the day, but it was also like how the story and the music and the images kind of touched them in a way, and I was just like, wow, this is powerful stuff. So it just got me into doing a lot of that, and so I started Timeline Films, and later merged that company with a creative agency, and we combined to become Advent Creative. So it was kind of a continuation of Timeline Films in that regard, and we did everything from commercials to local commercials to documentaries. We took documentaries and toured around the country in film festivals, and I loved it, man. It was so fun and it was so empowering, but I kind of got tired of producing material and content for other people's visions. And so that's when I kind of like thought, well, I want to start something and then harness those skills to be able to propel that message forward. And that's when Fight the New Drug came into the picture. And I started that still in college.
Got it. That's great. Yeah, I love the drive and just getting after it and pursuing your passion there. I also read that there are a couple other ventures that whether they were college or around that time, but Opal Design Group and then Owl Business Enterprises. What were those? Would love to hear.
Yeah, so Opal Design Group is still around today. So it's my wife's interior design firm. She, after we got married, she was working at a design firm as an interior designer, and I was looking. We were married for probably 10 months, less than a year. And I told her that I was going to leave my creative agency, which was, not, the most logical thing to do on paper, and go start Fight the New Drug. And I wanted to move down to Salt Lake City at the time. And she was like, well, what am I going to do? And I said, well, let's start an agency. And so I kind of stepped in to help with the leadership of that while she and another designer kind of came together and started on the design side. And I helped guide that. And that's still around today. There was a time when I was standing in as the CEO of the company and running the company. But over time, I stepped down, and my wife and her partner have kind of stepped into co-CEO positions in there, and they're doing great. And it's been a fun ride. That's been a really good company to see grow and develop. Owl Business Ventures. I don't know. I don't know. Everyone has successes and failures. I'd probably put this in the failure camp. So it was just an investment firm with me and a few buddies. Owl represented the first letter of each of our last names. Olsen, Warner, and Lee. So we were just called Owl Business Ventures, and we invested in a few things, kind of naive and didn't really know what we were getting into, and kind of lost our shirts on that one. So we dissolved that over time and chalked that up for learning experiences. We got into some highly volatile investments and didn't pan out for us. So. But we were young. I think that at the time we were still just out of college, and we had big ambitions. And when I can kind of get my hands onto something and I can like steer it with where I'm in charge with its success, I feel a lot more comfortable. But that one was just kind of like throwing money at something that I really had no business doing that and didn't work out. So.
Got it. Yeah. Well, hey, that's a great way to learn through failure, and the tenacity to try it is where you learn. So love it, man. Well, yeah. So shifting to Fight the New Drug. Well, yeah. So walk us through maybe the timeline. You're still in college. You're deep in the film and the creative marketing agency. What? Yeah, I'm very curious to hear, Clay. Like, why pornography? Why combating that? Where did that come from? Where did the idea Fight the New Drug come from? I'd love to hear the conception of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic question, and one that deserves an answer, because that's probably the question I get most often is like, why that? I mean, it's not to say it's not a good cause, but it's just like so random comparative to maybe, what you had been involved in previously and what your skills were. And the way I've answered in the past, and there's obviously a lot of influences that kind of led to that process, but it was a couple of things. Number one, I had experienced in my own family the devastation of pornography. I had a cousin that struggled with pornography to an extent that led him to actions that were both illegal and very incredibly inappropriate. And it led him to prison. And he told me later, after he got out, that it stemmed from his struggle with pornography. And that was kind of an eye-opening moment, and led me to do research up on campus and digging in and reading books of like, well, how is that possible? How, I was taught, come from a religious household, and was taught that this was, not good. It was wrong. But understanding the research and the science behind it, that was not necessarily something that I was very familiar with, nor were my peers. And so I started to do some research and found out that there was just a lot of research, neurologically, relationally, and societally, that really pointed to the fact that pornography was something that we should be concerned about as a society from a public health perspective, outside of the context of religiosity and or government affiliation or political affiliation. It was something that we could unify around and say, hey, this is not healthy for youth. This is not healthy in a healthy adult relationship. And here's the evidences for that. And I kind of thought, well, why aren't people telling the story? Simultaneously, along with that, I was running my creative agency. I felt like I was uniquely positioned to maybe step in and kind of like create a campaign around this, and I kind of build it up similar to the Truth campaign against tobacco. If anybody remembers that, your listeners, where they kind of took young people and made anti-tobacco, or rather a campaign against the smoking of tobacco or the use of tobacco through kind of creative messaging and means. Like they made it cool to stand up against tobacco. And I thought, well, let's take a page out of that book and like let's make this. Let's change the conversation from do check that's out to do that that's not cool, and here's why. And it was a very controversial subject, and so we thought like this is a creative challenge. And then on top of, so all those things are true, and then on top of that, I have always wanted to do something that I felt like had an impact, and I felt like I was kind of heading down a path in my career where I was doing commercials and I was doing all these things, but like I say this with respect to the organizations that I was promoting through our agency, but I felt like I was essentially metaphorically selling paper clips. Something that ultimately had little value, again, with respect to the greater good. I just felt like I'm not making the dent that I was put on this earth to make, and I didn't see a real path for that. So like I felt like Fight the New Drug, or this campaign, this idea, we didn't have a name yet, but this thing that was kind of in its birthing stage, had an opportunity to challenge me creatively, to propel a good message, to kind of address and help to address and help individuals that might stumble into that unknowingly, help them pivot towards something that's more healthy. Because again, largely the narrative around pornography was, this is like, get with the times, this is normal, this is natural, this is healthy. And I was like, well, hold on now, let's dig into the research. Is that actually true? And let's come at this to help people become more aware, just like we did in tobacco in the 80s. Well, it started in the 40s and lasted all the way into the 80s and 90s. So that's all of that was happening simultaneously as I was pursuing my career. I was thinking all these things were pulling me towards, well, why can't we do something to address this subject in a way that young people will listen to it and pay attention to? And I felt like if this came out of a boardroom, from adults or grandparents, or moms and dads, I just felt like it would fall flat on its face. It needed to come from a youthful voice that was speaking their language at the time, and so I leapt. I jumped, I sold it out to my partners, and I went full time with Fight the Drug, and was sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment trying to figure out what the heck this was going to be, what shape it was going to take, and what this was going to look like. And that was a very a massive risk. I didn't have any kids at the time, so it was something that I felt like, now is the time, strike while iron's hot, and I'm glad I did. It's been an incredible ride over the last 14 years with Fight the Drug.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving the context, because it makes so much sense when now that I'm familiar with Fight the New Drug, I've looked at it, I've heard of it probably for the past 5 to 7 years, even before we started recording. My cousin works with you, but you guys do a fantastic job promoting and really getting the message out there in the way you described, in a youthful, it resonates well with people who are having those issues. So I think you've done an amazing job. So going back to those early days, it sounded like it was you, and was it a couple of friends of yours at the time who started it while you were at Utah State? Maybe talk us through the first year, if you raised money, what was the business plan? Like, how were you going to make money? All those things. Would love to dive in.
Yeah, this is kind of a fun to reflect back on those days, because there's so many assumptions that we had that didn't actually pan out to be true, and then so many other things that we didn't think about that actually ended up coming to fruition. So, and that's the life of an entrepreneur, right? You kind of fake it till you make it. You kind of dive in, not fully knowing how things will work out, but just having this tenacity that it's going to work out. And I think there's something about youthful naivety that is kind of beautiful. And I encourage young entrepreneurs to never let go of it. Stay naive. Now, there is an unhealthy version of naivety that that you're not informed, you haven't done your research, but there is like something beautiful about a young kind of entrepreneur that says like, you can't tell me that I can't do this. And that's how we were. I remember sitting down with a group. It was the United Way. It was actually a representative of the United Way, and they were wanting to take this on in a different way. And I remember handing him my business card, which I just printed, right? For any new entrepreneur, getting your first business card is a moment. It is a moment. You like smell that card, like this is success. Even though anybody can go print a card, but it just felt like you're legitimate once you had a business card. So I handed him my business card, and we were so audacious with our messaging. It said, "Fight the Drug, the global campaign against pornography." We hadn't even like made an impact in our backyard, let alone the globe. And so it was extremely ambitious. And we said that, and I handed him my card, and he looks at it, and with his colleague, and again, these are adults. They have like, done campaigns. They had raised a lot of money. They had been around the block. And he looks at my card and he says, "Fight the Drug, the global." And he like snickered. He like goes, huh. And then he like points to his colleague. He's like, "The global campaign." And I was so offended in that moment. I was like, "How dare you?" Like, and again, that youthful naivety, like totally is like, "I'll prove you wrong. You just watch." And so anybody watching, like, hold on to that youthful naivety, because it allows you to go into places that others would kind of calculate their way out of. And had we done that, we would never have started Fighting the Drug. It wouldn't exist. So I'm so glad that we were just like audacious about it. It was me, Bo Lewis, Cam Lee, and Ryan Werner. We were kind of roommates in college, and we and really good friends. And we just kind of like were talking about it. I was talking about my experiences, my cousin's experiences, how this was just a problem and a plague among our generation, and how the narrative and the conversation around it felt very like off base from what maybe the realities were. And had this idea to start a campaign again. And at the time it was just that, a campaign. And we thought, this is again, some of the naivety that coming out, but like, we thought like, okay, like everybody, there's a lot of people that would be in favor of our cause. If everyone gives us, $10 to become a fighter, and they just give it to us just because they're in favor of the cause, we'll be able to grow that within the first 6 months to a few $1 million. You say, like, tell us about the first year. I mean, the first year was a slog. It was figuring things out. Like, I remember going door to door asking for money, which, by the way, for the listeners, you can't do without a permit. Learn that lesson. But like, we're just like trying to make something happen. We did phone-a-thons with our buddies and not telling them what to do. We'd like order pizza and we'd say, "Just come over." And then we put like a script in their hands, like, "Call all your rich friends," and just trying to like get people to help us launch off the ground. And so we were definitely embracing the fake it till you make it thing. We were just kind of like just throwing anything we could at it. We were kids with no prior experience starting a nonprofit. And eventually, finally, we were able to catch the attention and the ear of Roger Boyer, who's a philanthropist and well-known figure in the Salt Lake Valley. He's a real estate developer, and caught the attention of him through his son. And we started talking to him and kind of getting, selling the vision. And I remember one time he said, like, "Clay, I don't want to fund a startup. I want to give it to something that's already moving." And somehow in that moment, I convinced him that we were not a startup. I was like, "Oh, no, we're moving. We've got a website," it was like a garbage website. And we have like 100 people following us on Facebook. Like, we're well on our way. And for some reason, he bought that, and he just kind of said, okay. And eventually he decided to write us a $200,000 check every year for 3 years. And that was I mean, a game changer. I mean, we had worked months and months and months to get to that moment. So it wasn't like that just fell in our lap. We had worked hard to get there and to prove that and like to design it out and, you know, build out the mantra of what we were going to become. But once he did that, that's when I officially sold out to my partners and went full time. And at that time, we could only afford me. So I went full time. And the other founders were supportive and still involved, but more on a kind of board level. And that's how it kind of began with a full-time pursuit. And I remember sitting and I wrote out the fighter pledge. One of the first things I did, I wrote out what it meant to be a fighter, like the pledge for those of you who are familiar with that. And then I remember getting a phone call from a school randomly. And this is probably the first phone call that I had received as Fight the New Drug. So I like answered and it's like, is this Fight the New Drug? And it was like a cool moment. I was like, yeah, let me transfer you over to the CEO. And you know, it's just me. But I got this call and it was from a school counselor and he said, do you guys do assemblies? And at that time we had never even considered doing an assembly at a school. And I'm just like, absolutely, we do. Yep, 100% we do assemblies. Where, you know, tell me where to show up. And he tells me when and where and like to send over the slides so you can kind of verify. And I hung up and I was like, what have I done? So that propelled me into this race, working with neuroscientists and therapists and others to come up with a message, you know, an hour-long presentation for young people on the topic of pornography. You know, not kind of a daunting undertaking, and I'm certainly glad that there was no cameras present at that time and for those first assemblies, but they were at least good enough to get us to the next and the next and the next. And now we've done thousands of assemblies around the world, and have multiple presenters and speakers. And but yeah, I mean, we were hanging by, we were just hanging on by a thread, trying to make it all work out, which again, that resonates with most entrepreneurs listening to this would say, yep, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. It resonates with us, you know, for me specifically. So we're still within that first year of our company, our real estate investment company. And similar to you, we raised a similar amount of money from kind of a seed investor to get us off the ground and just try to help us to go full time into something. And so totally, it really resonates. The stress, trying to get off the ground, trying to, you know, being able to pay yourself something to be able to just keep the engine going. And so that's awesome, Clay. So from that first year, how did it look from there to kind of a point where you were stabilized, where you were like, okay, the ship is afloat, you're able to pay yourself a salary and things are working? Like, how did you get to that stage?
Well, I mean, as soon as Roger Boyer came on and you know, decided to fund us for those first 3 years, and in fact, he actually didn't conclude at the end of the 3 years. He renewed and continued on for many years after that. But as soon as he came on and committed to those first 3 years, he saw the need for what we were doing. He saw the unique version of what we wanted to create that wasn't existing in the market, and he decided to kind of, you know, test it out and see what we could do. And that was kind of, it was a stable moment, even though it was like there was no promises for the future. It was a stability moment where I could kind of get at least something for myself. And then I could, you know, use some of those funds to do photo shoots and to hire some design and to start crafting a narrative and taking the research from academic journals and packaging it in a way that it was going to connect with the audience and our focus. And so I would say that there was a sense of stability then, but we were still unproven. I think it wasn't until, you know, probably a few years after that, year 3, that, you know, we started to get more and more attention from more donors, more funding, and more fighters. We were starting to get people posting themselves in our t-shirts, Porn Kills Love t-shirts, or on Instagram, and that started to kind of blow up kind of a movement of young people kind of saying, I'm in on this, I want to help. And where the ownership of the movement really transferred from a little group of people, like in an office, to the distribution of our fighters being kind of the real drivers and the owners of the success of this. And I think that's the difference between a campaign and a movement. A campaign is a boardroom kind of coming up with a messaging and clever, catchphrase, and then they put it out on some billboards, and it kind of runs its course, like buckle up or this and that, and it's like, great. It ran its course. I hope we did some good, and they probably have some statistics to prove that. Whereas a movement is something that is not owned or governed necessarily within a boardroom, but rather it's like it's owned. It's on the shoulders of those that are following, those that are kind of committed to the cause, and they feel an ownership. They feel like, if I don't engage, if I don't, raise the flag myself, like that this movement might fail. And so, like when that is transferred over to your followers, to your allies, to your fighters, that's when kind of everything started to the momentum started to really build, and it was an exciting time when that kind of that momentum started moving, and our followers and our likes and everything started to just increase dramatically at that point.
Love it. And I'm curious, how a nonprofit works? So you hear that term get thrown around a lot, and but I'm curious, as a founder and kind of the person running the nonprofit, how do you think about, from an operational level, from a business level, from revenue, expenses, bottom line, like, I don't know, maybe talk us through that. Like, is all your revenue donations, or are you doing you have other sources of income? I'm just kind of, high level operationally, how do you make it make sense?
Yeah, so there are a lot of misconceptions about nonprofit, the nonprofit world. I remember we moved into this new neighborhood, and one of our neighbors said, like, "Oh, I think it's so nice that you can support your husband because he works for a nonprofit, meaning he doesn't get paid, and you must be the breadwinner for the home." And I'm like, and we just smiled and we're like, "Oh yeah," but the reality is that the only difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit is maybe you have a little bit more opportunities for where funds can come from in a nonprofit, but you can sell product, you can sell services, you can do all that just as you would with as a for-profit. But then you have the additional value of maybe getting the attention of some family foundations and government grants or whatnot to help us support it and augment it and sustain it in other ways. And of course, the biggest difference is that there is no equity. It's a public charity. And so you're not building something for like an exit down the road. I can't sell Fight the New Drug for money. But Fight the New Drug exists, and we can build it up. And individuals that work at Fight the New Drug are well compensated, and competitively so. They're not volunteering their time. These individuals are well compensated, and they have benefits just like anybody else. And it's a fantastic mode for certain types of initiatives. Nonprofit is the way to go, and it's powerful. And it doesn't mean that you have to be poor if you go down that road. But I love I work in both. I'm both in the nonprofit sector and the for-profit, and I love both. And I have loved my time in the nonprofit space. But yeah, most of the funds that come from Fight the New Drug come from a few different camps. Our speaking engagements, our merchandise, our fighter club, which is kind of an elite club of fighters that provide a certain amount of funding monthly, like $10 a month kind of stuff, to be able to participate in some unique and elite things. And then larger grants from family foundations primarily. We don't necessarily get a lot. We don't hardly ever get anything from government grants. We get most of our funding from family foundations around the country who are looking for ways to deploy their capital. They're obligated by the IRS to give a certain percentage of their earnings from the foundation side away to charitable initiatives. And so they have to give a certain percentage away every year. And so a lot of times they look for opportunities, look for organizations that fit their initiatives and their goals and aspirations. And we fit that for a lot of groups, and so we are a good channel for the people to provide funds to.
Makes sense. No, that's perfect. No, thanks, Clay. That's really, really eye-opening, because Yeah, I had always, and I'm sure a lot of people as well, viewed it more as a charitable, foundation, where it's all just like, hey, it's all coming in from donors and that's it. But yeah, that's great, and makes a lot of sense, and really smart to set it up that way. You mentioned the for-profit side, and I'm not sure if Fortify is part of that or not, but you have. In 2013, you created Fortify, which it sounds like is an app that helps people, take head-on action against recovering from addiction or compulsive behavior. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that, Clay. Why did you decide to create Fortify as kind of a means to help people with those compulsive behaviors?
Well, that journey started. So when I was doing assemblies a lot, I was going to schools, I was traveling the country, I was contacting, I was meeting face to face with a lot of youth. People were reaching out through Facebook and other means, and we were getting just hundreds of messages of support, hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of messages of support. But also a lot of people were saying, hey, I need help. I'm struggling with this. What do I do? And at first we were like, okay, no problem. Talk to your mom and dad, and I'm sure they'll, be able to get some help. They'll come back and say, yeah, that's not going to happen. There's no chance. I'm not going to do that. Like, okay, fine. Well, try these organizations. Here are some groups that we really like. And they said, well, those require a credit card. I'm 16 years old. I don't have a credit card. Okay. Well, gosh. And honestly, we were getting like tens of thousands of messages, and between like needing a credit card or parental consent were these massive barriers. It was like a Mount Everest that we were asking them to climb, and they're just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And so basically, as a society, we were telling these youth to stay in their dark corner longer and let the issue get much worse, and then once you get of age, then come talk to us and we can point you in the right direction. It's like, that's not good enough. And again, this was uncovering an issue that was largely unknown to the general public. Like, we know about drug addiction, we know the scale and scope, and we have statistics on where those things lie and how many deaths are per year. But with this issue, because it's so secretive and so easy to conceal, it's really hard to get a pulse on just how massive the struggle is for you. There's some statistics that show like how many people view it, but almost no statistics on how many people are really desperately struggling and not knowing how to proceed, and even suicidal because of their challenges. And we were hearing from that group. We were hearing from, again, thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And it was just too much. And I came back to the board and I said, guys, we have to do something. And in my creative agency, one of my clients was Franklin Covey, where we built kind of learning management systems for sales and leadership training. And I thought, well, hey, why don't we create a free online app-based as well as web-based experience where young people can come and get the help that they need, education, connection, and tracking and awareness tools, so that they can kind of be empowered. And little did I know that I was starting like a tech company in that moment. I didn't realize just how massive. Again, back to the youthful naivety. I just thought like, hey, we'll just do this. I probably need only about $12,000. Let's get this done. We can kind of lock it up and then help people and then move on and have it one of our products. Well, again, we got that approved. We kind of started moving forward. We got some funding, and we produced the first iteration of Fortify, which was specifically focused on sexual compulsivity or pornography addiction. And over time, the needs of that initiative, and we were helping hundreds of thousands of individuals in that camp from around the world, over 150 countries were downloading this app and getting help that they need around the world. And the needs, the financial needs of that were just getting more and more and more. So eventually I went and found some angel investors to buy Fortify out from the nonprofit, purchase it from the nonprofit so that it wasn't drowning the nonprofit, because that's what it was doing. It was taking over 50% of our annual budget was dedicated to this resource, and the focus of Fight the Drug is awareness, is the megaphone on the mountaintop, education. And so it wasn't healing and recovery. And so eventually I carved it out, bought it out from the nonprofit, and pulled it into a for-profit entity, and started to expand the tool into other areas. Like we have another tool called Turn for substance abuse challenges, another tool called Lift for depression and anxiety, and Climb for general growth and wellness. And we bundle that together and provide it to individuals, but also to corporations to provide as a wellness package for their employees, as we combine preventative technology and professional human care. And we allow that to be accessible through those resources. And so that's when Impact Suite kind of was born in that moment. And we separated those two. Symbiotic, they cross promote. They're very synergistic, but they are two separate entities legally, and have different staffs and different annual goals and everything like that.
Got it. I love it. And I did check out, the Impact Suite website. I looked through the different tools that you have, Fortify being one, and the others that you mentioned. I mean, everything looks extremely well done, very user friendly. So for if I'm a corporation, like let's say our company Park West, and we said, hey, we want to, as part of maybe our healthcare plan or something, provide this to our employees, is that something where we pay Impact Suite, an annual premium or something, and then that gets provided to our employees? Or how do you typically work with companies on that level?
Yeah, I mean, that is how it works typically. Like we have a number of different partnerships with a lot of different groups where we provide different levels of services, but the typical organization will contact us and say, hey, we want to provide this. Mental health is a challenge that we are facing that is far beyond anything we've seen in recent years. COVID did us no favors. It's really kind of exacerbated the challenge, and we have to do something. We no longer can kind of just like assume that this is like a personal issue that has to be dealt with at home. Whereas I think that we collectively, societally, we bear the responsibility of how to be addressing this. And we have a lot of unique approaches and theories on what's broken about the system today. I won't get into that right now, but I will say that, typically we provide those services. An employer will kind of cover the cost, similar to what they would do for like a health benefit. In fact, often it's tacked on to that health benefit. And then we provide mental health and behavioral health services, both human services, so therapy and coaching, as well as the preventative technology that we provide. And the combination has yielded incredible and powerful and life-changing results for a lot of people. And so we're very proud of what we have built and where we're heading. And again, all kind of centered around impact. I've always said to entrepreneurs, don't chase money, chase impact, and the money will follow. Anytime that I've chased money in my life, I feel like I've regretted that. When I've chased impact, it's just paid back tenfold what I could have thought for.
Yeah, really well said, Clay. I think that's spot on, and what a great product, and something that I'm sure we'll consider as we grow, and others should certainly as well. I wanted to spend a little bit here, the last bit here, just talking more so about pornography, and about, because I think it's such an issue. I don't know the numbers, but I mean, I know, friends, people, growing up, I mean, everyone, at least on, friends that I have, or on, maybe it's a guy thing, but has been exposed to pornography at some point, right? And it's a little bit of a taboo subject. People don't like to talk about it, maybe, but I'd love to just ask a few questions, Clay, in terms of that topic, to dive in a little bit for people who are listening, who may be struggling with an addiction to pornography or something similar. So I guess, first question, kind of why do people, turn to pornography? Like, are there triggers, gateways? Like what keeps people initially going into it and then keeps people coming back? What is it?
Yeah, a great question. And there's a lot of things we could share right here, but I think we first need to acknowledge that pornography is tapping into a natural craving and desire that we as the human race have, which, by the way, is a good and natural thing for us to have a desire for those that we are attracted to and love. And so it's tapping into that, but it's kind of it's a hollow counterfeit alternative to that leads to a lot of self-destructive and negative consequences. But it masquerades as something that is tapping into a very natural desire, right? And so that's one way, just a natural curiosity and drive and hormones kind of pushing, like, hey, I can access this. But where it really took off, I mean, pornography's been around for a long time. Like, it's been around for a very long time. And, back in the day, what you could access was, in a magazine, and it was bare-chested women in cornfields, and that was the extent of it. And you had to kind of stash magazines, go to your uncle's, basement, whatever, and find what you could. Today, that landscape has so drastically changed that it is literally transformed an entire generation's understanding of love and consent and sexuality. It is shaping an arousal and sexual template of an entire generation. Today, due to the advent of smartphones and the high-speed internet and the availability to access this at any time, anywhere, has altered it. I think that parents, sometimes they think, well, what's the big deal? This was around when I was a kid. I'm fine, no big deal. And the reality is that things have shifted so much that it's not just a quantity. Yes, we have more access to this than any other time in human history. But in addition to that, the content itself has also adjusted in dramatic ways. What was once softcore is now what was once hardcore is now softcore, and now we are into gonzo porn and other like extremely aggressive and violent and harmful variations and fetishes of pornography that is again shaping a young generation to have a completely different definition as to what love and consent and intimacy even is. So, we are drawn to it oftentimes because there is something there's the natural kind of appetite, but then we are drawn to pornography because of its ease, its convenience, and its anonymity. And we're also drawn to it because we are dealing with a lot of challenges in our society today that go beyond sexual, challenges. So we have a lot of challenges, and oftentimes when we are facing hardship or challenges or emotional issues, we often turn to coping mechanisms. We often turn to something to fill that gap. And when people come to us and say, "Hey, I need to fix this pornography issue," we say, great, let's do it. But we broaden the scope and say, okay, what are the driving conditions or the driving motivators for this challenge to manifest in your life? Like, do we need to be looking at past traumas or meaning and purpose, or your sleeping and nutritional and exercise habits? All of these lifestyle conditions can turn into risk factors for addiction. And there is no addiction more accessible than pornography. There are a lot of others available, but no more accessible than pornography. And so as we recognize the realities of today's landscape, and as we start to address key lifestyle that the literature has identified as key lifestyle triggers or risk factors, we can start to make micro adjustments in those areas that are most vulnerable, and start to see that your appetite or desire for that kind of content starts to weaken and lessen over time to where you no longer need that, and you can fulfill those cravings in a much more healthy avenue and venue at the right time and right place with the right person. But how pornography is a hollow counterfeit to that, and ultimately delivers a lot of consequences that were not the intention from the get-go for the individual.
Yeah, I love it, Clay. And I know a lot of people think of pornography as, like you mentioned earlier, healthy, or it's normal, whatever. But what are some of the true harm? Like, how does pornography harm us, whether neurologically, socially? Like, why is it not just fine to casually look at pornography?
Yeah, I think a lot of people just assume that it's a harmless pastime with no victim. And I honestly, to answer that question, I mean, I could spend the entire hour and beyond answering that question, because there's so many things that I could speak to. But let's just talk on the couple that you brought up, neurologically, relationally, and societally. So let's just talk about the neuroscience. We know more about the brain than we've ever known. We know more today than we've ever known. We know more about what drives addiction and what leads to addiction. And the same neurological processes that are occurring when somebody is engaging in drugs or recreational drugs, are the same neurological processes that are occurring with process-based addictions or behavioral-based addictions like gambling, shopping, and pornography. And so we do see that individuals that consume pornography on a regular basis need more often, and a more extreme version, just to maintain their level of normality. And oftentimes it leads them to seek out to those more extreme versions, and sometimes that leads them to move off the screen into sexually assaulting individuals, or seeking out younger and younger individuals, which we're seeing kind of what's being played out with the explosion of child pornography and pedophilia. And I'm not saying that everybody that watches pornography is going to end up in those extreme categories, but that is the fuel that drives us. We talk about wanting to address trafficking and sex tourism and all these things that are really just negative realities in our society. Well, the things that are driving those conditions to exist is our appetite for pornography. We can't adequately address those issues without first addressing the driving force, the major driving force for those to exist. So neurologically, we know there are over 40 neurological studies done recently that have identified that pornography can, in fact, develop into an addiction. That the addiction research, I mean, you can look at research from Valerie Voon in Cambridge University, and Simone Kuhn in Germany. And I've interviewed these individuals and even flown out to Germany and met with her and did an interview with her. And the research is clear that pornography is causing major neurological challenges, which is leading individuals to struggle to stop those behaviors, because the braking pad, the prefrontal cortex of their brain, that is the braking system that kind of like lets you logically think through situations and scenarios and choose the path that is best suited for the best results, is being altered and rewired to the point where it's more difficult to make those decisions the next time and the next time and the next time. It's a vicious cycle. So neurologically, it's not a harmless pastime. There are individual influences and the impacts. It's conditioning us to crave that kind of material, and more and more pornography is coming out that is aggressive and violent and negative towards towards the opposite gender, and acting out in harmful ways towards them. And that, as we consume that, and then have the neurological release with a climax in conditioning to that type of material, it's conditioning us over time to seek out that type of material to feel satisfied. And the vanilla stuff, or what we'd call quote unquote vanilla, no longer does it. So you need to kind of go after that more aggressive material. So individually, it has an effect. Relationally, I mean, you can just take that and just copy paste it over. How do you think that is influencing a relationship that is supposed to be give and take and back and forth and about their needs and my needs? Pornography never has to get up early in the morning. It doesn't go on a period. It is always willing. It is always new, and it is always the most extreme versions of anything you could imagine. And it is right here, right now. What partner can compete with that level of access? And again, as you get conditioned to that, I've spoken to hundreds of men who have had troubles getting an erection with a real partner because they're conditioned to a computer screen with pixels, and they cannot get satisfied with a real human being or a single female body. And so it's wreaking havoc on relationships. And I could go deeper into that. But just for short order here, moving on to the societal impact, again, as we start to see those types of adjustments on the individual and relational side, you can start to see the ripple effect on how that would impact a society that is struggling with pornography and how they, and we see the results of this with, again, I brought up sex trafficking and sex tourism, but also just sexual assault in the workplace and other things as we start to play out these fetishes with school teachers or bosses or secretaries or nurses. And we start to see how, the boundaries, they actually want this. They actually want this. They don't say that, but they want this, as I've been conditioned to assume. And they start to desire and crave that. And it leads a lot of men to act out in very harmful ways. And even if they don't act out, it leads them to treat individuals differently than they otherwise would, because of that conditioning in there. And so there are massive implications to pornography. There is not one longitudinal study that suggests benefit to consuming pornography within a relationship. Not one. All the short-term studies that have been conducted and cited saying, hey, look, it's beneficial. The partners are, it's put an extra spark into a relationship. Those are only looking at short-term studies because, initially when you introduce pornography, it's something novel, it's interesting, it's fun. And if you bring that with a partner, it can be interesting for a time. But over time, individuals end up preferring the pixels to people, preferring the screen to a real relationship because it doesn't take work. It's easy and accessible, and I can get everything I need from that at any time I want. And so the longitudinal studies are clear in relationships. And I'll end on this. One of the world's leading experts on relationships, the Gottmans, and John and Julie Gottman from the Gottman Institute in Seattle, they can predict with immense accuracy, 90% accuracy, whether a couple will stay together after their first year. They can predict that, and they said, in an open letter to pornography, they were silent for years, just thinking, well, to each their own. But eventually, after thousands of interviews with couples, they saw how much pornography was negatively influencing relationships. And they said in an interview, an open letter to pornography, that after careful consideration, they came out and said that pornography poses a serious threat to relationship harmony and intimacy, and that they could no longer stay silent, and that pornography was a major predictor for divorce and the deterioration of relationship satisfaction. And that resonated and lined up with the research that we were familiar with, as individuals that consume pornography on a regular basis were less satisfied with their partners across the board, because again, that comparison. So to he or she, and this is a growing problem among females too, to the individual that says that pornography is a harmless pastime, in fact, it's even healthy, I would say you're not familiar with the research, and it is the popular view because it is a over $100 billion industry worldwide. So anytime there's a massive amount of money, there's going to be massive propaganda to make sure that doesn't change. And it's also something that a lot of individuals are struggling with, and they don't want that to change. They're just like, don't touch my porn, right? I want to address sex trafficking, but don't you dare come after my porn. And we're not out there to shut pornography down. We're not out there to make it illegal or let it go, make it go away, because that's unrealistic. And to consenting individuals that are fully aware of what they're doing, power to you. Just like individuals, like smoking tobacco is still around today. People that light up, they're not unaware. They are fully aware of the negative physical consequences, but they still do it in appropriate ways. And if they're of age, and if they do it in areas that are designated for that. And I'm fine with that. You want to do it, go for it. But let us not be naive. Let us not be, blindfolded to the risks and harms of pornography. And if you want to do it as an adult, consenting adult, go for it. But for minors and for individuals that recognize that this is not a healthy exchange for a relationship, many people will start to move in a more healthy direction and move away from pornography. And that is our goal at Fight the Drug. That is our goal, to help people consider before consuming and move in a more healthy direction.
I love it, Clay. That's so good and so eye-opening, and I can hear the passion in your voice as you're explaining this, and yeah, 100% agree with everything you said, and I love it. Last question on that, and then we'll wrap up. For somebody who has tried and to quit, looking at pornography and failed, over and over again, or just what do you say, or how does somebody overcome an addiction to pornography? I mean, I know that's probably unpacking a huge thing, but it's like what are the one or two things that you're like, hey, here are some quick tips that you could give to somebody who's trying to do that?
Yeah, and you're right. There's a lot to share here. There's a lot of like specific strategies and things that I could kind of get into, but I think overall, I would say this: don't try to do this alone. I know that this is not something that is like not easy, and it's something that you kind of want to get under control on your own, because of the embarrassment or the risks of opening up to somebody else. But without question, those that have an ally or an accountability partner, whatever you want to call it, in their corner, assisting them and being a part of their journey of recovery, where they can be open and honest without judgment and just love and commitment to the process. Those individuals far and away see greater success more quickly than those that try to white knuckle it, to try to kind of Incredible Hulk it through and just kind of like and do it on their own. So number one, accountability. I would also say you've got to have grace for yourself. A lot of people, shame comes into this process where you feel like when you kind of mess up and you have a setback, you kind of go into this dark corner of like, doggone, I know better. I know the research. I watched the videos. I promised myself this was the last time. I did it again. Gosh darn it, right? They're just so upset with themselves. And shame can come in and say, you're a terrible person. You're not worth it. You're not worth being loved. All these things. And that research has shown that shame actually comes in and actually drives the individual to continue the behavior more. It perpetuates the very behavior that they're trying to avoid. Whereas guilt, which is very different than shame. Shame, they're almost different opposite spectrum. Guilt is something that is informing us that we're doing something that is out of line with our values. And it is something that actually has been shown to propel you towards healthier decisions and healthier living, whereas shame propels you deeper into the cycle. And so, there's a healthy level of guilt that ought to be felt. This idea today, where it's like you shouldn't feel guilt for anything, like you should just kind of do your own thing and whatever comes. Guilt is a healthy part of our society and ought to be something that we pay attention to and recognize, and helps us steer in a better direction. Shame, on the other hand, perpetuates it. So I'd say avoid shaming yourself. I think the biggest culprits for shame in our society are ourselves. We shame ourselves for the behaviors that we do more than anybody else shames us. And so I'd steer clear of language like that. You're not worthy. You're a monster. You're broken. That this is a process, and recognize that it's a process, and you're making strides, and you're paying attention, and you're dissecting, what led to it, and what's leading to those issues. What are the contributing factors? Rather than just hacking at the branches, let's get at the roots of what's driving these behaviors, and perhaps that's meaning and purpose. Perhaps that's lifestyle elements of sleep, nutrition, and exercise, the big three. Or perhaps it's past trauma that you haven't fully dealt with or addressed. Or perhaps that it could be a variety of things. As we uncover those realities and start to address those and improve those, individuals have just not linear improvements, but catalytic improvements, just massive growth. And so between accountability and being and staying away from shame and being curious about the driving contributing forces, if you kind of navigate those elements, you are setting yourself up for success. And I think there's a lot of things you can turn to. I think the getting professional support in that process is great. The Fortify tool that we mentioned earlier in the podcast at joinfortify.com, or just going to the App Store and downloading Fortify, is a great companion to that journey, helping you learn and connect and track your progress over time. I would recommend those aspects. So yeah, that's a quick answer.
Yeah, love it, and such good advice, Clay, and I really appreciate you sharing that. The last question, then we'll be done here, is stepping away from kind of the pornography side, just life in general for Clay Olsen. This question I ask everybody on the show is to think about success in life and how you define that for you, whether in business or family or relationships, but how does Clay Olsen define kind of a life well lived or success?
I would say I define success by the amount of money I have in my bank account. Just kidding. No, I not at all that. I define success for me, and I think that like success can have many different shades, but for me, it is all around like, am I doing, and I believe in this. And for those listeners that don't, we all have our different beliefs, but I believe that we all have kind of a purpose and a mission and a calling, whatever you want to call it. And if I believe that I am fulfilling that, if that leads me to a life that is, doesn't have the nicest this or that or whatever, like that is success to me. And so like for me, it's like I'm driven to like make a dent and help people in the way I know how. And whether that's in my community or whether that's, broader than that, I'm as long as I'm fulfilling what I believe my mission here on earth is to fulfill, I feel like that is success, and I'll take the challenges that come along with those decisions. And I don't shy away from the challenges. People have often said like, well, if it's hard, then it probably means it's not right. And I fully disagree with that sentiment. I think that I think the difference between a successful entrepreneur and somebody that maybe never becomes an entrepreneur or doesn't succeed is that tenacity and that persistence and that willingness to kind of just plow through the challenges that have come up, because they will happen without question. They will emerge, and that can be internal, external, whatever it may be. But entrepreneurs that stick with it and kind of get up after they get knocked down are most likely to kind of like find that success. And so find that passion, the thing that drives you, the thing that like gets you up in the morning and you don't feel like you're going to any sort of a job. You're just going to make your dent. And I always encourage people to make your dent, whatever that may be. Go make your dent, whether that's through your career or that's external from your career on the side. Go have an impact. The life is too short, and there's too much negative around us that we bear the responsibility individually to kind of go make things a little bit better in whatever way you see that needing to happen. So I don't know. For me, success is surrounded by family and my children, my wife, and knowing that I'm fulfilling what I'm supposed to be doing. I think that everything else is kind of secondary to that. I don't need other validations. That's all I need.
I love it. Well, no better way to end, Clay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing with Fight the New Drug, with Fortify, for the movement that you've created, impacting thousands and thousands of lives. And if anyone's listening, go check out Fight the New Drug and Fortify and what Clay has built. It's incredibly valuable. So thank you so much, Clay, and really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Chase. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The Chase Hudson Show. If you liked what you heard, please leave me a review and subscribe to this podcast. Reviews really help us to find better guests and to improve the overall quality of the show. If you'd like to connect with me directly or want to learn more about investing in real estate, send me a DM on Instagram at @officialchasehudson. Again, we really appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.